All right, guys. Well, bit of a change of pace. We're going to be talking about, buzzword, programmatic TV, but also something that I think a lot of people don't really know about and are really curious. So I'm personally very excited to have this discussion. So thank you, Dan and Serena. If you guys want to sort of kick it off by explaining to everybody a little bit of who you are and sort of what your roles are and how you guys are dealing with programmatic TV.
All right, I'll start. I'm Serena Duff. I run Horizon Media's Los Angeles office. We've taken, I think as we'll discuss today, programmatic TV is definitely something that's on the forefront. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. We've taken a pretty progressive approach to testing and learning in this space and building out some options that are pretty exciting from a client standpoint. So looking forward to sharing that with you guys today. And hopefully getting header bidding into the conversation somewhere, because I just wanted to say that word after hearing them say it so much.
Maybe the goal could be getting every single buzzword today into this conversation.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do header bidding and PMP today for TV. So Dan Ackerman, I run the global TV practice for AOL, came to AOL via the Adapt TV acquisition, and now part of Verizon. So we're now part of a telephone company. But yeah, we've been at this for a few years, organically developing it internally and then through acquisition. But I think our first thing is our kind of our definition. Should we just jump right into that?
Yeah, let's jump right in. So what, buzzword, what is programmatic TV?
It's not real-time bidding.
Okay.
No, but I'll go a little further than that. So we think about it as data-driven through the entire process, from targeting all the way through measurement and attribution, but leveraging automation and machine decisioning. So it's not just data-driven, because I think television, period, is data-driven. Ask any television planner, they're using data to figure out what to buy. I think it's the addition of automation and machine decisioning.
Yep, exactly. I mean, there's reams and reams of consumer data out there that we have been applying to the television marketplace from a gut standpoint, looking at the data, but now it allows automation. It's the two keywords, automation and data, and those are the fundamentals of any programmatic program, whether it's on television or whether it's applied to the digital space. So it's being able now to analyze that data in a much faster way and cross-measure it with behavioral attributes of how people watch television and the kind of programming they like, and being able to come out with a much smarter approach to television. I'll say scheduling or planning, because it's really not about buying. It's putting together the right program. And it's also taking ratings a little more out of the equation. I don't think ratings are going to disappear completely anytime soon. But what it does do now is allow us to look at the audience composition of a very, very specific consumer segment that relates back to your brands. So instead of just looking at simple demographics when it comes to ratings and buying some of the biggest properties out there because they have high ratings, it allows us now to look at the composition of a show. And I think that's going to open things up much more to some smaller programs that maybe weren't being considered on your buy because of low ratings, but they have a much higher composition of the right audience.
Yeah, I think we do programmatic TV a disservice when we relegate it just to what can be bought through an automated platform, because I think it's much bigger than that. The automation and the machine decisioning and the data really does start at the planning, deciding who my audience should be. What data should I use to generate a target, and then how do I approach looking at media? What's going to be valuable before you actually go and make the transaction? So there's a lot further up the river in making that decision. If it was just relegated to what can I buy through an automated platform, you'd be stuck with aggregated local inventory right now, which I'm not sure is the best representation of what big Fortune 200 brands want to do on a national basis. So our approach has really been to look at the data piece, the audience segmentation and targeting, now kind of getting to that automated piece.
Yep. So I guess TV has always really been a traditional way of buying. So how is programmatic TV sort of permeating between traditional and digital media?
Well, I think from our standpoint, it's taking a lot of the attributes of what makes digital media so successful and being able to apply that more precise targeting to how we approach television. So a lot of the learnings that we now have from digital can be applied to the television marketplace. And again, it goes back to looking at the TV landscape more from a concentration standpoint and an impression standpoint as opposed to just straight ratings. So something we've been doing for a long time in the digital space, feels very fresh and new in the television space.
We talk a lot about, in the digital space, DMPs, using first-party data. I think that's the advertisers like Kathy and Netflix have been talking about that. Like that's gold in the way that you go to market, the effectiveness, the cost efficiency, the impact. When you use your first-party data, you can see that impact almost immediately wherever you're buying in the digital space. It just hasn't been applied. I think a little bit in household addressable, maybe a little bit in VOD, in these environments where you can do a direct match. We have really focused on technology to activate first-party data. Take your CRM data, your shopper data, and there's so many categories that have really rich consumer data. It's just not being utilized with their biggest spend. So I think that unlocking it starts to feel like the tools and the capabilities, not only in targeting, but in measurement, that people become accustomed to in digital, now using that in TV. And the impact on $1 billion in spend, if you find 3%, not efficiency, but more impact, can be material as opposed to in a different medium or environment where the spends are so much smaller.
Yeah, so I mean, the whole focus isn't about finding efficiencies, but it's about finding more impressions. So if I can increase my specific brand consumer impressions by 27%, then I've created a much more efficient buying platform. It doesn't mean brands are going to stay out of the high-profile, more expensive television shows that are out there, but it's going to definitely increase their reach against a much more specific audience.
You brought up, or mentioned about measurement and,
Yeah.
and stuff. So there's, this massive debate, all this conversation going around RentTrack and ComScore coming together. What's that going to do to impact the market? There is a value to having a common, blunt, easy currency. It just normalizes everything. But currency is very different than targeting and optimization. So you may still transact. You may still transact for Capital One on 18 to 49 GRPs,
Right.
but the data that you're using to inform what you want to buy and the value of that to you is significantly different. So the currency doesn't necessarily have to change to really change the way things are being purchased or measured.
So I'm actually going to sort of jump ahead then. Yeah. So do you think I guess the currency now is Nielsen, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So do you think that's going to change in light of TV moving to programmatic? Because, digital's CPM, essentially CPC, all these go back into a CPM-based buy. So is that going to change?
I don't think it's going to change overnight. And I think there's always a place for ratings. It's really the language that we've all grown up on. But that said, I think people want it to change. And I think the agencies want it to change. I think clients want it to change, and I think broadcast networks want it to change. Because right now, we are seeing a significant decline in ratings, and it's not that people aren't still consuming tremendous amounts of content. They are. They're just watching it on a lot of different screens, and there's a lot of different choice. So I actually think if we can go to a more targeted impressions-based approach, the networks are going to probably come out ahead, and people will stop judging programming on a very, very broad rating.
I think it's funny because there's so much push to have GRPs and normalization in digital for it to look more like television.
TV?
Yeah, so DAR, whatever their acronym is today, they keep changing it. So it has a place. It has a place for being able to do reach curves across digital environments and TV environments. But when you look at kind of other industries that don't focus as much on rating points, more response-based advertisers, it doesn't matter. It's about impact on business. So, I think the networks coming out in the upfront this year are talking much more about, I think Turner was the most aggressive in saying, we'll make deals based on outcomes. It's hard to scale that because when you look at your inventory and how do you price it, it's very easy to price it against a demographic. So that's why I think that will perpetuate for a while, but the way that you do deals, maybe secondary guarantees or what you're optimizing on, will become a much bigger part of the conversation. Viacom, Turner, NBC, CBS, they're investing a lot of money, time, and resources in building out targeting and measurement platforms. I think that speaks to where the industry's going.
Great. So bringing it back to the data conversation, which is, I think, one of the big values of programmatic TV. You mentioned, bringing first-party data to the table to target people. What other data is available? Is it just that DMP data, or are we going into, third-party data?
Yeah, there's a lot of data available. all of the syndicated data that we've been using from a planning standpoint for years is third-party data that's easily accessible and loaded into these data management platforms that we're building. So MRI and Simmons, Nielsen data, but then there's also credit card data, as Dan mentioned, and there's shopper data, where you can really zero in on the type of segment who's actually purchasing your product. And then there's also Axiom data and Experian data. So a lot of data points to pull from and a lot of segments that can be built outside of the first-party data that your client may or may not have.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges in TV is the nature of data deals are set up where it's upfront to pay for them. In the digital space, you can select different data sets and you pay a CPM on a campaign-by-campaign basis. In TV, it's just the data companies don't approach it that way. So Nielsen, Rentrak, they're all really built on big upfront committed annual license deals, so it's really prohibitive to advertisers. How do you select NBI, NCS, Rentrak data, all these different data sets? I mean, you could spend tens of millions of dollars just on that. So it is fairly prohibitive. I think that's why platforms like ours and some other people in the space, we are kind of making that upfront investment and having a pool of different data sets for marketers and advertisers to use. But I think the direction, other than the third-party data, the value of first-party data is, one, it's your owned asset. It takes money to get a DMP and organize that as an advertiser, but it is the most valuable and most representative. But there are industries that just don't have it. So now I think a big movement we're focusing on this is how do you convert digital behavior data or device-based data, so device ID, physical lat-long data or cookie data, and convert that into targetable segments for TV. I think that's opening up, bridging the two worlds together. But in general, it's really cost prohibitive to dive into all the third-party syndicated data.
So you've dove a little bit into detail about how to tie that data into target, but how are you actually reporting back on all of that to sort of prove the value of programmatic TV to your agencies and then to ultimately your clients?
I think some of it's still, we're still in I will say it's still early days. We're still in very much a test and learn phase and figuring things out as we go along, but definitely looking at what a different television buy that was informed by more data is delivering from a sales standpoint. So sales is still a key indicator of success. The amount of impressions, obviously, that we've been able to improve the buy on and reach more of the right people. And then there's also just a lot of the client's proprietary tracking when it comes to brand awareness, when it comes to brand affinity. Was this new way of purchasing, did it move the needle in those areas?
So, it's tough. It's a really tough one. So in digital, if you're using a DSP or you have your own platform, you can run 100% of your video or display inventory and have a full view of the whole market, whether it's through a PMP, through exchanges, even through direct deals, and all of that data comes back so you can understand the impact on sale or brand. TV, it's tough. Nobody is taking 70% of their TV budget. So if you look at a big marketer like Capital One or one of your studio clients, if you're taking 1% or 3% and putting it in through a programmatic channel, really difficult to do like a sales lift study or brand lift study because it's unless you're dark on a certain set of networks. So I think getting to looking at broader attribution beyond just that particular buy is important, but also, as I mentioned before, using programmatic up in planning and in analytics, it impacts your entire buy rather than just a small portion. So it's difficult.
I think the closest thing we have to it now, and we have a lot of network clients, we can actually see how that change in the buy or the change in programming affected who viewed their network or who viewed the program that we were marketing. But at the end of the day, it's still last click attribution essentially. So we can see which of the programs actually drove people to view that show on that night. But it's limited. It's taking a really small aspect of what we've been doing for a long time in digital. But so that's kind of the easiest way we can do it right now. But again, it's just in one category.
We do have some clients that actually use the technology to inform everything that they do in retail and travel. And there, because we own a multi-touch attribution platform, we have an integration there between Convertro, which is our platform. So we are actually looking at real ROI metrics because they tag all of their media, every piece of offline or online media is running through that platform, and bringing that back into the decisioning engine on what to buy. So it's informed by actual ROI metrics. So it's a way that some people are actually driving their business. They may still negotiate their media on a GRP, but all of their decisioning in the background is, what's the lifetime value of the users that I'm driving in through this media? What's the impact on sale? What's the impact on foot traffic? So many different KPIs beyond your traditional TV KPIs.
Well, I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit from data, as much as I do find it interesting. So taking it back a step, what is the incentive for TV networks, and maybe Dan, this is a question for you specifically, or cable providers to really embrace programmatic?
Yeah, well, from the programmer standpoint, their first foray into that is by launching their own kind of targeting platforms. I think the opportunity here is, Viacom, I think they've been the most vocal about, the underrepresentation of their media by traditional age gender metrics. So, as Serena mentioned, there is incredible value in new channels and new networks. Even the big networks, MTV, may be underrepresented in measuring millennials through traditional measurement. So I think them investing in these data sets or in potentially making it available through a PMP TV, because that is a term for television as well. That you
one
can,
buzzword.
Yeah, there we go, PMP. I don't know how to work in header bidding.
Yeah, that's
but
tough.
that you can actually start to extract some additional value. You can change the conversation. You may still transact on 18 to 49 or 18 to 34, but because now you're going to be transparent and show, here's how I deliver frequent moviegoers, here's how I deliver, frequent grocery shoppers, that you can start to agree together on a higher value. And even in digital, I think buyers are willing to pay more for that very specific right audience because the impact's going to be better, rather than just buying not as data-informed impressions in open exchanges or that don't have the data connected to it.
Makes sense. So I'm going to shift this now to the buy side. So now we talked about, obviously traditional TV adopting programmatic. How are the agencies adjusting with programmatic TV? Since I know there's a digital team and then there's a TV team. So how is that working on the agency side?
Yeah, I think most agencies, or at least most of the larger agencies, have specialty practices that are very focused on the innovation of and the understanding of advanced TV and how to move that forward from an addressable standpoint, from a programmatic standpoint, and even from a one-to-one linear TV standpoint. So everyone is in the space and learning. Where we've taken it, and I'll put in a shameless plug for Horizon, where we've taken it one step further is actually building out our own data management platform, similar to what AOL has, similar to what Turner and NBCU has, and bringing that offering in-house so that we can now take in, rather than relying on a partnership with Turner, and we're still testing it. We're actually testing out Turner's platform. We'll probably work with AOL at some point and test out their platform. We have, well, yes, we have. But so it's not just specific to the platform that we've built, but where ours and Dan's are alike is that it allows us to look at the entire television landscape, whether it's paid or whether it's like HBO. We can actually look at the entire landscape where, say, with a Turner and NBCU, they can only look at the assets that they have, and they can only do targeted buys against the assets that they have. So, it's still, this is a newer platform for us. We've put it together in the last year, so it's something that we're still in the test and learn phases as well, and getting clients on board with testing it out and with better understanding how we can use data to make more out of their buys and get their message to the right people, which is really what programmatic is all about at the end of the day.
So we've learned about, I guess, everybody in the room now should at least know what programmatic TV is now. But where is the market today? Are we, to tie in on the last discussion, are we in a 1.0 phase, or are we in 1.5? Where are we?
We're in a 0.5.
0.5. We're not even at 1.0.
We're not even in 1.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple groups that are gathering to try to put some standard definitions around it, just because it is, it's a polarizing topic of what does it actually mean. So I think some standardization there. It's going to be a little while in terms of the other data sets outside of Nielsen and how people are thinking about it. And it's really fragmented. I mean, as Serena was just saying, it's like if you want to do a deal as an agency, there's Viacom's, NBC's, like all these different views of data. How do you go back to your customer and say, this was a success campaign-wide. Each one has a different...
Call AOL.
We call it. Thank you very much. That's where we're going. No, you do need a more universal view to be able to measure that. So that is tough. But to your question before, though, I think what we've seen at agencies, it is definitely I hate to use the term land grab, but it is. Who is it? The trading desk? Is it the digital group? Is it the TV buyers? Not all of them have really figured out who kind of owns, like there's addressable TV, there's VOD, there's smart linear, programmatic TV. It's difficult to kind of zero in. So the conversation sometimes helps with brands to then help inform and just say, agency kind of figured this out. There's also different financial models around it. There's technology fees and data fees that I don't think TV advertisers have been accustomed to paying for. They buy the media, there's gross and net, and that's what they pay for.
See the spot on TV.
So, right, exactly. So we're trying to work with the agency to figure out the models of how does it work? How does the agency, make it still smart for them to do it, benefit the advertiser, so the whole ecosystem wins, including the publisher, including the network.
Got it. So you touched a bit on the challenges, standards, maybe brands not really knowing about the fees. What do you think we really need to do to make programmatic TV scalable? Because right now it's probably not at that point.
It kind of goes back to what the challenges are. We don't have, the infrastructure hasn't really been built in the same way that it's been built for the digital landscape. If we're truly going to realize the promise of programmatic TV, which, it's going to happen in phases. So we're kind of in phase one now, where suddenly we're looking at data in this fresh new way where, everyone who's been in the digital space is like, we've been doing that, for the last 10 years. But what needs to happen next then is how can we optimize cross-channel? How can we optimize cross-channel from a creative standpoint? How can we automate our buying? I don't think we're anywhere close to an automated platform where we can buy and sell. There's just a lot of challenges in the way right now, but I think what's exciting is everyone is suddenly talking about it, and it's not just the ad tech providers that are talking about it, it's the agencies, it's the network. I mean, we've seen kind of more progress in the television landscape in the last year or two than we've probably seen in the last 20 years. So I think the fact that you've got three critical groups that are pretty determined to move the needle forward and figure this space out is kind of the exciting promise of it.
So here's your thought leadership chance, opportunity. So where do you, we're talking about everybody talking about it, where is programmatic TV going in the next few years?
I'm going to let you take that one.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think first the definition of television is going to be reformed a bit. So when you think about programmatic, it's not just linear. You have to look at VOD, you have to look at household addressable, traditional national broadcast, the programmers. Local becomes a bigger part of it because they've actually embraced the automation piece sooner than the programmers have. So now throw in other TV-like experiences, OTT, things that feel a little bit like digital but also are consumed a lot like TV. So first, I think the definition of what falls into the TV bucket is one of those things. I think the availability of automated access to inventory will increase pretty significantly. I think, as Serena mentioned, when you have Donna Speciale and Lindy Accarino talking about programmatic in their upfronts, that's a sea change in the way that the supply side of the business is talking about it. So those are kind of two things that we'll start to develop. It's not going to it's not like next year we'll be talking about it being a $10 billion industry. I think this is something that is now to 2020. It starts to develop and become a material part of the business. Double-digit percentages are either being transacted through automation or the different practices of programmatic are applied to it. So those are, I think, some of the big moves. But I think maybe the 16 or the 17, 18 upfront is when there will be material deals being cut on alternative data sets, and network big programmers will have automated access to inventory.
And this will be done through header bidding.
Yes,
exactly.
Exactly.
We'll
That's
have
going to happen in
figured out header
2018.
bidding on the set-top box. Yes.
So I think we have a couple of minutes for one or two questions, if anybody has any. None? Then I'll close. I'll ask the last question then, if everybody's too scared to speak. So I guess just in closing, is programmatic TV a win-win for both agencies, or brands, and networks? Does everybody win with this?
I think it's absolutely a win-win for agencies and brands. Anytime you can use data to make smarter decisions is a huge win-win. And I just think where the potential of where programmatic can go and the fact that we are not that far off from being able to really optimize the entire video landscape is incredibly exciting. I think it can be a win, absolutely, for the networks. I don't think it's a loss proposition, but they have to change pretty quickly, and they have to start kind of speaking a new language pretty quickly. And there's no roadmap for that right now, so we're kind of all figuring it out as we go along. But I think from an inventory standpoint, yeah, there's an opportunity then for them to start selling, take the ratings out of the conversation, and it becomes more about what shows have the right audience that's going to appeal most to my brand.
So I think it's a win for TV. Television is still, in my mind, the most powerful medium out there in building brands and driving results. So anyone involved in the TV ecosystem, tech, data, programmers, networks, operators, distributors, agencies, it's a win for television overall. It starts to pull back a lot of this money that's been flowing out of television because you have the accountability, you have the targetability that people have been rushing to other platforms for. And there's still, it's not just older demographics. There's still more television consumption happening today than ever before. Yep. So yeah, I think net is an absolute win for the industry. I
mean, the biggest win could be for the ad tech company or companies that figure out and crack how to truly bring all this together and create the right infrastructure. So.
But it can't be a silo. It can't just be TV. We have to start.
No, it has to be across.
I think our biggest challenge is aligning it with mobile and digital environments, so there's some connectivity and you can understand how it works all holistically.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Serena and Dan. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation again next year to see
where we are.
See where we are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.